"That dog is as broken as its handler," the lead instructor sneered. The recruits erupted in laughter. Maya said nothing, bending to suit the trembling K-9. As her jacket lifted, a major's breath caught. "That's a Ghost Division sigil." Fort Braddock was a furnace of dust, ambition, and the testosterone-fueled symphony of barking dogs. Here, the future of the military's elite K-9 Corps was forged in noise and aggression. And in the middle of it all were Maya Callahan and the dog named Shadow, a silent, discordant note in the booming orchestra. At 38, Maya was a decade older than the other handlers, her face a roadmap of experiences she never spoke of, her eyes holding a placid depth that the others mistook for detachment. Her partner, Shadow, a Belgian Malinois with a coat the color of midnight, was her mirror. While other dogs lunged at their leashes, straining with guttural growls, Shadow seemed to shrink into himself. He flinched at loud noises, his tail perpetually tucked, his body a constant, trembling apology. The pair was a running joke. "Look at Jake," a cocky handler with a jawline as sharp as his critiques, would say loud enough for everyone to hear. "The broken leading the broken. It's a waste of a slot." His dog, a massive German shepherd named Titan, would punctuate the insult with a chesty bark. The other recruits, young and eager to prove their dominance, would chuckle along. They practiced aggressive takedowns, their voices raw from shouting commands. "Attack! Hold! Out!" Maya never shouted. Her training sessions were quiet affairs conducted in a remote corner of the field. She'd sit on the ground for an hour, simply letting Shadow exist near her, rewarding him with a soft word when he'd finally stop trembling. Her commands were whispers. "Find," she'd murmur, and Shadow would hesitantly track a scent trail she'd laid. They never practiced attacks. Their work was a slow, meticulous dance of building trust. "What's the point, Callahan?" Instructor Miller, a man built like a cinderblock, barked one afternoon. "This isn't a therapy session. That dog needs to learn to bite. You need to learn to command." "He knows how to bite, Sergeant," Maya replied, her voice even. "I'm teaching him when not to." The answer only fueled the ridicule. The breaking point came during a high-pressure public evaluation. Each handler had to demonstrate a simulated suspect apprehension. When it was their turn, Jake stepped forward. "Sergeant, with all due respect, they're holding us back. Let's see what they've actually got. Full pressure. Now. Or cut them from the program." A chorus of agreement rippled through the recruits. Miller's eyes narrowed on Maya. "You heard him, Callahan. It's time to perform or pack your bags. Get in the scenario zone. Now." The air in the mock-urban scenario zone was thick with tension. It was a maze of concrete walls and rusted-out cars, designed to simulate the chaos of a real engagement. The other recruits lined the observation deck above, their faces a mixture of pity and smug expectation. Jake stood at the front, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "The scenario is simple, Callahan," Sergeant Miller's voice boomed over the loudspeaker. "Hostile target is behind the blue sedan. Engage and neutralize on command." Maya nodded slowly, her hand resting gently on Shadow's back. The dog was vibrating with anxiety, his eyes darting to every shadow. She knelt, whispering things only he could hear. It looked to the others like she was praying, or hesitating. "What's she waiting for?" a recruit muttered. "Any day now, Grandma," Jake called down, eliciting a few snickers. Ignoring them, Maya straightened up. She adjusted the tactical vest she wore, and as she did, the hem of her worn army green t-shirt snagged on a buckle. For a split second, the fabric lifted, exposing a sliver of skin on her right hip, just above the waistband of her pants. To most, it was nothing. But on the observation deck, standing behind the recruits, was Major Quinn. He was the base's deputy commander, a man known for his quiet intensity, there for a routine inspection. His gaze had been sweeping idly over the scene, but at that moment, it froze. His posture went rigid. He took a sharp, audible breath. The others were focused on Maya's perceived failure, but Quinn saw the mark. It was a complex tattoo, barely glimpsed, a stylized wolf's head, inked in stark black. But it was the details that made Quinn's blood run cold. The wolf was formed from 3 ethereal, ghost-like lines, and within the design, where a star should have been, there was only empty space. Quinn moved, a blur of motion that startled the recruits. He stormed past them, his face pale and set like stone. "Stop," he roared, his voice cracking like a whip across the training ground. "Everybody, stand down. Halt the exercise." The sudden, furious command stunned everyone into silence. Miller fumbled with the loudspeaker controls. Below, Maya looked up, her expression unreadable. Major Quinn didn't wait. He strode down the metal steps, his boots clanging with an urgent rhythm. He walked directly onto the field, past the stunned Sergeant Miller, and stopped a few feet from Maya. His eyes weren't on her face, but locked on her hip. The recruits watched in breathless confusion as the major, a man they all feared and respected, spoke in a choked, trembling whisper. That's a Ghost Division sigil, and that missing star." The world seemed to stop. The wind died. The only sound was the frantic panting of the dogs, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just fractured their reality. Mockery had evaporated, replaced by a profound and terrifying silence. The training exercise was over. Major Quinn ordered Sergeant Miller to dismiss the recruits, but to have them remain on standby. Then he led Maya away from the prying eyes, towards the quiet solitude of an empty hangar. The air inside was cool and smelled of oil and old machinery. The other handlers huddled together, 100 yards away, their voices buzzing with speculation. "What the hell is the Ghost Division?" Jake asked, his earlier arrogance completely gone, replaced by a nervous curiosity. An older instructor, a grizzled veteran who had been silent until now, spoke in a low voice. "It's not real. It's a ghost story. A myth they tell new recruits. A Black Ops K-9 unit from the early days of the war. They said they operated where no one else could. Went in silent, came out leaving nothing but stories. The official line is they never existed." He paused. "And the unofficial line is that they were all wiped out during Operation Crimson Sand." Inside the hangar, Major Quinn faced Maya, his composure slowly returning, but his eyes were still filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "The records from Crimson Sand, they're sealed. Classified above top secret. The official report lists every member of Ghost Division as MIA, presumed Kia. Records aren't always complete, sir," Maya said. Her voice was flat, betraying no emotion. Quinn's gaze dropped again to her side. "That sigil. I've only seen drawings of it. From redacted reports. Each operator and their K-9 partner were a single unit, symbolized by the wolf's head. But the star, that missing star. What does it mean?" He looked her directly in the eyes, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The legend says it's a marker." Maya finally broke her silence. Her gaze drifted to a dusty window, looking out at nothing. The placid calm in her eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, ancient sorrow. "It isn't a legend, Major." Her voice was barely audible. "It means you didn't come home with your partner. It represents every soul we had to leave behind in the dust." Quinn felt the air leave his lungs. He was connecting dots, fragments of classified intel and battlefield rumors that had haunted him for over a decade. He was standing in the presence of someone who was supposed to be dead, a living member of a unit that officially never was. He cleared his throat. "How many were in your unit?" 6 handlers. 6 partners. "And how many came home?" Maya finally turned her gaze from the window to meet his. For the first time, he saw the full weight of the years in her eyes. It wasn't just sadness, it was a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. "You're looking at her, sir. The immensity of her words hung in the cavernous space. 6 elite units, 12 souls, had gone into the shadows. And only one woman had walked back out. Major Quinn ran a hand over his face, the hangar's silence pressing in on him. "The Al-Hadi compound," he said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "I was there. I was a lieutenant with 3rd Platoon. We were the QRF for Crimson Sand." He began to pace, the memories storming back, vivid and unwelcome. Intel said it was a low-level outpost. A milk run. We walked right into the belly of the beast. Ambushed from all sides. My radio man was hit in the first 30 seconds. We were pinned down in a bombed-out tailor shop on the west side of the compound, completely blind. We thought we were dead. For 6 hours, we thought we were dead. Then, just, silence. The shooting stopped. A rescue team found us an hour later. They said the hostiles had just vanished. The official report called it a tactical retreat by the enemy. He stopped pacing and looked at Maya, his expression pleading for an answer to a question he'd held for 15 years. It never made sense. They had us. Why would they leave? Maya leaned against a steel support beam, her posture betraying a weariness that went beyond muscle and bone. She looked at the major, not with pity, but with the shared understanding of a survivor. "That's not how it happened, sir," she said softly. Her voice took on a new tone, a precise, detached clarity, as if she were reading an after-action report from her own soul. "You were not in a tailor shop. It was a bakery. The sign was shot to pieces, but you could still smell the yeast. You were on the 2nd floor, northeast corner. There were 3 of you left. You, Sergeant Evans, and a PFC named Miller. Evans had shrapnel in his left leg. You had a head wound you'd wrapped with a piece of your sleeve. You checked your ammo count 17 times. You had less than 2 full mags between you." Quinn stared, his face ashen. These were details no report contained. Details no one outside that room could possibly know. How could you know that?" he whispered. "Because for 5 of those 6 hours," Maya continued, her eyes unfocused, seeing the past, "I was watching you. I was in the minaret of the old mosque, 400 meters to your northeast. Me and my partner, Caesar." The hangar seemed to dissolve around them, replaced by the sun-scorched image of the past. Our mission was overwatch. Observe and report only. But command was blind. The comms were down. They didn't know you were there. We saw the ambush unfold. We counted 16 hostile combatants converge on your position. 16. You didn't stand a chance. She paused, taking a slow breath. The order was, "Do not engage." But Ghost Division had another rule, "Leave no one behind." I made a choice. You took them out?" Quinn asked, his voice trembling. "We did," Maya corrected him gently. "Caesar and I. It wasn't about shooting. It was about silence. We left the minaret. We moved through the shadows. One by one. A silenced pistol, a knife, and a dog who could move like smoke. We took out 14 of them without anyone firing a shot. They never knew we were there." She fell silent. The hardest part of the story was yet to come. There were 2 left. On the roof of the building opposite you, setting up a machine gun. They would have turned your little bakery into Swiss cheese. We were out of time. I sent Caesar. Her voice cracked for the first time. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. He took the first one out on the rooftop. The second guy, he had a dead man switch. A grenade. Caesar intercepted him, but the pin was already pulled. He did his job. He saved your team. Maya looked at Quinn, her eyes finally clear. The official report says the enemy retreated. The truth is, they didn't retreat. They were eliminated. And the official report lists Caesar as equipment lost in combat. I came back. He didn't. She finally pushed herself off the beam and looked towards the hangar door, back to the present. That's what the missing star is for, Major. It's for him. When Maya and Major Quinn emerged from the hangar, the training ground was still shrouded in an unnerved silence. The recruits stood in a loose, awkward group, their earlier bravado replaced by wide-eyed confusion. Jake, the alpha handler, couldn't meet her eyes. He was staring at the ground, replaying a decade of his own certainty crumbling into dust. He was the one who finally broke the silence, his voice barely a croak. Why didn't you tell us? Why let us treat you like that? Maya stopped and looked at him, her gaze not angry, but impossibly tired. Because the moment you start talking about the legend, you forget the weight of the leash. You forget the partner at the other end of it. She didn't offer any more explanation. Instead, she walked back to the center of the training field where Shadow was waiting patiently with a junior instructor. The dog, sensing her return, rose to his feet, his tail giving a single, tentative wag. Give me the objective, she said to Sergeant Miller, her voice calm and clear. Miller, looking thoroughly humbled, pointed to a dummy at the far end of the obstacle course. There's a cell phone in the breast pocket of that dummy. Retrieve it. Without damaging the device. It was a test of fine motor control, of delicacy, a test no one thought that a broken Shadow could possibly pass. Maya knelt in front of her dog. She didn't shout a command. She simply put her forehead against his, whispering for a few seconds. Then she stood back. Seek, she said, her voice a soft puff of air. What happened next silenced Fort Braddock for the second time that day. There was no ferocious bark, no aggressive launch. Shadow moved like a drop of ink on water. He flowed over the A-frame wall, not with power, but with a liquid grace. He weaved through the poles so fluidly he seemed to dislocate his own joints. He didn't run, he glided, a black streak against the brown dust, his paws making no sound. He reached the dummy and didn't pounce. He rose on his hind legs, placing his front paws gently on the dummy's chest. With the surgical precision of a bomb disposal expert, he used his teeth to grip the very edge of the pocket's fabric. He tugged once, gently. Then he dipped his snout in, grasped the phone, and backed away. He returned to Maya with the same silent, ghostly speed. He sat before her and gently placed the undamaged phone at her feet. The entire evolution, from command to completion, had taken less than 15 seconds. It was a breathtaking display of perfect control, absolute trust, and silent obedience. It was more terrifying and more impressive than any violent takedown they had ever witnessed. Maya lovingly stroked Shadow's head, and the dog leaned into her touch, his entire body finally relaxed. She looked up at the stunned faces of the recruits. Strength isn't about how loud you can yell, or how hard your dog can bite, she said, her voice carrying across the silent field. It's about building a trust so absolute that your partner will walk through fire for you, and knowing how to bring him back. That was the Ghost Division way. Maya and Shadow were gone by morning. They left as quietly as they had existed at Fort Braddock, without fanfare or farewells. There was no formal discharge. Major Quinn had simply signed a single piece of paper with the words, "Further training not required." But she had left something behind. On her neatly made cot in the barracks, each of the other handlers found a personalized, handwritten note. Jake's was on top. He picked it up, his hands trembling slightly. It wasn't a note of rebuke or gloating. It was several pages of detailed observations on his handling of Titan. It praised his dog's courage and his own dedication, but then gently pointed out how his aggressive commands were creating anxiety in the animal, suggesting alternative, calmer methods to build a deeper bond. She had done this for every single handler. Detailed, insightful, and deeply respectful notes that showed she had been watching them not with judgment, but with a teacher's eye. At the bottom of each note was the same sentence, written in clean, block letters, "Your partner trusts you more than you know." Earn it. Jake sat on his bunk, reading the notes over and over. He looked over at Titan, who was watching him with intelligent, patient eyes. For the first time, Jake didn't see a weapon to be wielded, he saw a partner to be understood. The culture of K-9 training at Fort Braddock began to change that day. The shouting got a little quieter. The handlers spent more time on the ground with their dogs, and less time yanking on their leashes. Years later, Major Quinn, now Colonel Quinn, would often be asked by new recruits about the legend of the Ghost Division. He would just smile and unlock his desk drawer. He wouldn't show them a redacted file or a grainy photo. He would show them a stack of faded, handwritten notes. Legends are just stories, he'd say. What matters is what we learn from them. A true ghost came here once. She wasn't here to be trained. She was here to teach. We were just too loud to listen. True warriors aren't always the ones with the most medals or the loudest voices. They are often the quiet ones, the ones sitting in the corner, mending the pieces of themselves and helping to mend the pieces of others. They carry their battles silently, and their greatest victories are not won on the battlefield, but in the slow, patient work of earning back a soul, both their own, and that of the loyal partner sitting at their feet. They don't need applause. They just need to know that the trust they give is returned, and that they, and the ones they protect, are worth the fight. Remember to treat the quiet ones with respect. You never know what ghosts they live with, or what silent battles they once fought for you.